At my son's 7th birthday party, my wealthy ex-in-laws mocked the simple handmade gift I brought him, but when my son unwrapped it, the room fell silent. Before we get to that moment, I'd love to know which city you're watching from today, and don't forget to subscribe for our daily stories. Now, let's head to the party. In the quiet, sunlit corner of my small studio apartment, I felt like a king. Surrounded by the familiar scent of charcoal and linseed oil, I was a creator, someone who could turn shadows and light into emotion and life. But the moment I stepped outside that space, I became something else entirely, a failure. My divorce from Megan 2 years earlier wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was a public trial of my worth. In the eyes of her wealthy and judgmental parents, Frank and Helen, I had been weighed and found lacking. They had never accepted my choice to be an artist. My ex-father-in-law once called it a profession for dreamers and drifters. Now that I was no longer part of their family, they seemed determined to make my son Sam believe his father was a nobody. Their weapon of choice was money. They flooded Sam's life with the latest gaming consoles, luxury sneakers, and expensive gadgets, things I could never compete with on the modest income I earned from commissioned portraits. But this wasn't generosity, it was strategy. They wanted Sam to see that their world built on wealth and status was brighter and more valuable than mine, the world of art and imagination. But today was Sam's 7th birthday. For 3 months, I had poured all my time, effort, and heart into creating a gift they could never outshine. It wasn't a toy, it was a masterpiece, a life-sized, photorealistic charcoal portrait of my son, one that captured not just his face but his spirit. It was, without question, the best work I had ever done. That morning, as I wrapped the large canvas in simple brown craft paper, my phone rang. It was Megan. Her tone carried that familiar impatience. "Ryan, please don't be late for Sam Sepp's party," she sighed. "My parents have gone all out this year." "I won't be late," I replied. Then came the sting in her voice. "Please tell me you got him a real present this time, not another one of your drawings. He's 7 now. He wants toys, not art." I closed my eyes. "I have to go, Megan," I said quietly. "I see you at the party." I glanced at the wrapped canvas, leaning against the wall. It was more than just a drawing. It was a piece of me, a reflection of my love for my son. But to Megan and her parents, it would always be a worthless sketch from a worthless father. Little did they know that in just a few hours, that drawing would become the most powerful and most humbling thing they had ever seen. I drove to my ex-in-law's mansion, the canvas securely buckled in the passenger seat beside me. Their house, an enormous suburban palace, was everything my small paint-stained studio wasn't. It belonged to a world I had once been part of, but was now firmly shut out from. By the time I arrived, the party was already in full swing. The backyard looked like a carnival of excess, an enormous bouncy castle, a hired magician twisting balloon animals, and a mountain of gifts stacked high beside the pool. It was a celebration only grandparents with something to prove could throw. I walked through the crowd of well-dressed guests, my paint-stained jeans and brown paper wrapped canvas making me feel completely out of place. Then I saw Sam. His face lit up the moment he spotted me. "Dad, you made it," he shouted, running toward me. "Happy birthday, buddy," I said, handing him the gift. "This is for you." Before he could open it, Frank appeared, holding a glass of scotch, his voice booming with forced cheer. "Ryan, glad you could make it," he said, patting my back a little too hard. Then, turning to Sam, he added, "Why don't you put that one with the rest of the real presents?" He winked at one of his friends. "Grandpa's got something a little more exciting than one of your dad's projects." I smiled, a tight, practiced smile I'd worn many times before. I wasn't there to argue. I wasn't there to prove anything. I was there for my son, to see him smile, to share the moment, to simply be his father. That was my quiet sacrifice. My ex-mother-in-law, Helen, soon approached. Her expression was one of polished sympathy. "Ryan dear," she said softly, "it's so nice of you to come." Her eyes drifted toward the plain wrapped canvas I'd placed on the edge of the gift table. She sighed, a delicate, deliberate sound. "I do hope you didn't spend too much on that. We all know things have been difficult for you lately. It's a gift from the heart, Helen, I replied calmly. Yes, well, she said with a faint smile, you can pay the rent with heart, can you? I spent the next hour in quiet, invisible agony, a ghost at my own son's birthday party. I watched as Sam was showered with a mountain of expensive, meaningless toys. I watched my ex-in-laws parade him around like a trophy, a living display of their wealth and generosity. Among the crowd, I noticed an older gentleman, Mr. Harrison, one of Frank's longtime friends, watching quietly. His sharp, observant eyes occasionally drifted toward my forgotten gift with a look of professional curiosity. Eventually, it was time for the main event, the unwrapping of presents. Sam sat in a large chair surrounded by piles of brightly wrapped boxes. Naturally, he opened his grandparents' gifts first, the latest video game console, an enormous 1,000-piece Lego set, and a remote-controlled drone. Each new item drew cheers and applause from the guests, while Frank and Helen glowed with pride. Then, after the last shiny box had been opened, Frank strolled to the gift table and picked up my large, flat, brown paper-wrapped package. He held it high for everyone to see. And now, he said, his tone thick with mockery, let's see what kind of masterpiece your starving artist of a father brought this year, Sam. Laughter rippled through the crowd. My son looked embarrassed as he took the simple package. My heart pounded. This was the moment of truth, the moment when my vulnerability and my love for him would meet in front of everyone. Sam tore away the brown paper with excited hands, and then the world fell silent. The chatter stopped completely. Even Frank's friends froze mid-laugh. A deep, uneasy quiet filled the backyard. The guests, expecting a childish sketch, now found themselves staring at something entirely different, something their world of wealth and possessions had no comparison for. It was a portrait of my son, but not just a portrait, it was him. For 3 months, I had worked on that piece in the quiet hours after Sam fell asleep, using an old Renaissance technique with charcoal and white chalk on gray-toned paper. Every ounce of skill, every memory of his 7-year-old face, every bit of my love was in it. I captured the spark in his eyes, the tiny chip on his tooth from his first bike fall, the faint freckles that appeared each summer. It wasn't just a drawing, it was his soul on paper. Sam was the first to speak. He stared at the portrait, eyes wide with wonder, and reached out a finger to touch the cheek on the canvas. Wow, he whispered softly. Dad, it sets me. Frank and Helen stood frozen, their confident smiles gone, replaced with disbelief. They didn't truly understand art, but they recognized power, and they could feel the unsettling power radiating from that portrait, created by the man they dismissed as a failure. Then Mr. Harrison began to move. The crowd parted as he walked slowly toward the portrait, his expression filled with genuine admiration. He knelt beside my son, studying the work closely. My God, young man, he said, in a low, reverent tone, directed more at the art than at me. This is extraordinary. He looked up at me, his eyes full of respect. The technique is flawless. The emotion, the precision. Sepp captured this child Sepp's very essence. It's Sepp's a masterpiece. Standing, he turned to address the crowd. I'm a collector, he said clearly, and this is one of the finest contemporary portraits I've seen in years. I have a space in my collection, right next to an early Lucian Freud, where this would fit perfectly. Then, in a calm, unwavering voice, he added, I'll offer you $50,000 for it, right here, right now. The silence that followed was almost tangible. The entire party stared in shock. Frank and Helen's faces twisted in disbelief as the worthless drawing from their failed ex-son-in-law was suddenly valued higher than the luxury SUV they'd just gifted their grandson. I didn't look at the collector or my in-laws. I looked at my son, my bright, proud boy, his eyes shining with admiration. Then I turned to Mr. Harrison. Thank you, sir, I said evenly. I'm truly honored by your offer. I looked back at Sam and smiled. But I'm afraid this piece isn't for sale. Sam glanced between Mr. Harrison and the portrait, his face glowing with pride. He didn't understand the adult world of money and status. All he knew was that his dad, the man who drew him, was being celebrated. That was enough for him. As As I met the eyes of Frank and Helen, I could see it, the collapse of their carefully built world, one based on the belief that wealth defined worth, and in that moment, that illusion shattered completely, replaced by something far greater and far more human. The once worthless drawing from the so-called failed ex-son-in-law had become the most valuable and talked about piece at their lavish party. The expressions on Frank and Helen's faces were a mix of disbelief and horror, an oddly satisfying sight. But it was Megan's reaction that carried the most weight. She wasn't focused on the money or the collector's praise. She was looking at the portrait of her son, and for the first time, she truly saw it, not just as a drawing, but as a reflection of a father's deep and genuine love. A love no amount of her parents' wealth could ever replace. The silence broke when Mr. Harrison, the collector, let out a warm, amused chuckle. "I see," he said, his eyes gleaming with newfound respect. "The piece isn't for sale. A man of integrity and talent. Even better." He reached into his jacket and handed me his elegant business card. "My offer stands, should you ever change your mind," he said. Then, leaning in slightly, he added in a confidential tone, "And if you have other works you're willing to sell, call me first." With that, he gave a polite nod to my stunned ex-in-laws and walked away, leaving a trail of quiet chaos behind. The party, for all intents and purposes, was over. Guests began to leave, each with that look of delight people get after witnessing a scandal they can't wait to discuss later. Frank was the first to regain his voice, trying to mask his humiliation. He approached with forced cheerfulness. "Can you believe it?" he boomed, clapping me on the back. "My son-in-law, ex-son-in-law, a real hidden talent. We always knew he had it in him, didn't we, Helen?" I said nothing, only giving him a calm, pitying look that said far more than any words could. Then I turned to my son. "What do you say, buddy? Ready to go home?" Sam nodded, holding tightly to the corner of his priceless portrait. As we reached the edge of the lawn, Megan approached quietly. "Ryan," she said, her voice soft, familiar, almost hesitant. It was the voice of the woman I had once loved, before her parents' influence had changed her. I'm sorry," she whispered, "for what I said on the phone, for everything." Her eyes lifted to the portrait. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "I know," I said simply. Then I turned and walked away with my son by my side. Near the gate, Mr. Harrison was waiting. "I meant what I said," he told me, his tone full of genuine enthusiasm. "You're an extraordinary, undiscovered talent. I know people in the art world who would love to see your work." He smiled, a sincere, transformative smile. "I'd like to offer you a solo exhibition at my private gallery in the city. I'll handle all expenses. All you have to do is paint." I looked at the most respected man in the city's art scene, realizing he was offering me a dream I thought had died long ago. I had arrived at this party labeled a failure, a broke artist, and an unworthy father, but I was leaving with my son's love, my ex-wife's respect, and a second chance at life. Frank and Helen had planned my humiliation, but instead, in their arrogance, they had launched my career. The drive home was peaceful. Sam was still glowing with excitement. "Dad," he said, eyes wide with wonder, "that man said your drawing was a masterpiece. He said you are a real artist." "He did, buddy," I said, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. "Are we rich now?" he asked. I laughed, a real, unrestrained laugh. "No, buddy," I replied, glancing at him fondly. "We said her not rich. We said her something better. We said her artists." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. I called Mr. Harrison, and he stayed true to his word. He became more than a patron. He became a mentor. He introduced me to gallery owners, critics, and artists. My work, once dismissed as a hobby, was finally being seen and appreciated. I was no longer a struggling artist. I was an emerging one. Megan and I also found a sense of peace. The divorce had been bitter, poisoned by her parents' control. But after their public humiliation, their influence faded. Megan began to change. She became the person I had fallen in love with, and a supportive co-parent to our son. 3 months later came the most satisfying moment of all. Opening night of my first solo exhibition at Mr. Harrison's exclusive downtown gallery. The room was packed packed with the city's most influential figures, and my art, the work that had once been mocked, was finally celebrated. Frank and Helen showed up, uninvited, of course. They approached, wearing expressions of fake pride. "Ryan, my boy," Frank boomed too loudly. "We always knew you had it in you. We setch so proud. In fact, Helen and I were just saying we setched love to invest in your next series." I looked at them, not with anger, but with quiet pity. "Frank, Helen," I said clearly, loud enough for others nearby to hear, "thank you for coming. But you're no longer my family, and you won't be investing in my work." Then I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there finally irrelevant. The centerpiece of the exhibition was my son's portrait. It wasn't for sale. It hung proudly on the main wall, a symbol of the love that had started this entire journey. At the end of the night, as the gallery emptied, I stood beside Sam, both of us gazing at the portrait. "You know," I told him, "your grandparents were right about one thing. They always said a man's worth is measured by the value of his gifts." I smiled at the drawing, the once worthless gift that had changed everything. But on that day, a simple piece of charcoal and paper taught them a lesson they'll never forget. I looked down at Sam's smiling face and realized the truth. The greatest gift a father can ever give his son is something truly priceless. An incredible story of love, redemption, and artistic justice. What did you think of Ryan's final words to his ex-in-laws at the gallery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you were cheering for Ryan, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories of poetic karma. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.